I was scared as hell. You got to go learn to do something else, or you fall back on something that you already know. And I wasn't going back to the military. The knees was done. That was done. So it was like, okay, well, then what do you want to do with this education that you have and this knowledge base that you have and this depth and breadth of people that you know now in a city that's really inviting to people that are looking to shake hands with you and say, what would you like to do next? So I spent about a month being scared. And in that time frame, I got really serious about some things that were sitting in the book. I would like to do this. Well, what's stopping you from doing it? I got all of this momentum, right? Well, nothing's stopping me. Well, let's just try some things, right? And it just so happened that those things were working. It didn't make me special. It's just like I trusted that inertia. I trusted the business relationships, and I was able to just go. My name is Dmitri Julius, by way of Los Angeles, California. Never forget that. By way of Austin, Texas, and I'm excited to get into it with you.
Dmitri, you are one of the rare people that truly gets to say that they disrupted a multi-billion-dollar industry. You and your team at Icon successfully built a construction technology company that both lowered the cost and increased the speed of building as you guys tackled a global housing crisis. I mean, you guys have partnered with both NASA and the military on various 3D printed building projects and have been valued at over $2 billion as of February of 2022. You spent 5 years actively with the company and wore many hats, from the VP of Ops to Chief People Officer and even a leader of special projects. So for starters, how did all of this start?
Oh man, what a fun journey there. What I think I love the most about Austin, Texas is that opportunities like that actually happen to people. This isn't made up, it didn't have to be Hollywood. But it's just like everything else that matters, it's relationships. I moved to Texas with the goal of doing something that I thought was going to be impactful for humanity. And as far back as I can remember, the one thing that was the great equalizer, if you will, the cornerstone of that American dream was housing. Coming from the projects myself, coming from Southern California, living out in Los Angeles and understanding what housing inequity looked like, at the time I don't think I had the words for it, but I knew if I could figure out a way to help democratize the cost of housing, we could start making a difference. I was working with local construction companies and basically just utilized that knowledge base to start working for a local startup. It was called Treehouse. Think like Home Depot meets Whole Foods. Had a baby and we were doing that. So it was like smart home all the way down to like chicken feed. Like I'm talking about, it was a crazy place. But the goal of that organization was to fundamentally make poorly built houses incrementally better. How can I make a poorly performing HVAC, 5 or 6% better? How can I put solar on this house? How can I put paints that don't off gas and make our children sick? So we were doing that for a few years. But the big question that came out of that ended up being the thesis for Icon, was what if we stopped trying to make bad houses a little better and just made better houses? So that opportunity ran its course. And by the way, don't trust nobody in the startup space that don't got no negative exits, because they lying to you. That ran its course and ultimately had to learn the hard lesson first, which was like, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you've gotta close the doors, burn the ships, and send everybody home. But that lesson loomed really large because those relationships stayed intact. So one day I literally got a phone call from our old CEO and our co-founder that said, that thing that we've been talking about, we're gonna give it a shot. I'm gonna call you in a couple of weeks when the funding is done. I need employee number one to come help me with this operation. And that's
also. So you were employee number one?
The very first person in the building that wasn't a co-founder. And I'm talking about, I say the building, we didn't have one at the time. We were working at a co-working space downtown, really trying to figure out where the lease was gonna be, how we were gonna have vehicles, who were we gonna target to get engineers in the building. We built it all from scratch. I signed my name's on the very first lease. We, from nothing to 550 full-time employees in a relatively large valuation, but a lot of hustle.
Relatively large valuation, sure. I want to jump around here a little bit.
Let's do it.
I want to talk about your role as VP of Ops. What operational pivots did you implement to integrate groundbreaking 3D printing technology? And how did you manage the pressure that came with these high-stake decisions?
I'll start with the pressure question because it never really felt like pressure, right? You walk into rooms and you tell people we're going to change the world, and 9 out of 10 times you get laughed at. You can have that conversation 1,000 times and maybe 4 or 5 people believe you, but we always believed it. So for us, it was like, hey, they already betting against us. This team, we know we're building something special, but everybody else doesn't seem to see it yet. Let's go prove them wrong. That puts the pressure on everybody else. We felt great about our mission. We knew what we were trying to do. If we can fundamentally change the cost of housing, make it faster, more affordable, and ultimately a higher quality house, we knew people would adopt this technology. It was just about creating the infrastructure to allow us to actually go do that. So a part of our job at the outset was really just educating potential customers and letting them know like, hey, this will work for you. And now we see, unfortunately, with the shift towards stronger weather patterns, more extreme storms, et cetera, Los Angeles, unfortunately, being on fire, that concrete houses that are also flame resistant, mold resistant, really provide people opportunities to mitigate the stresses of an ever-changing climate. The second thing that I will say is for institutions of operational prowess, man, we were doing something that had never been done before. We were writing the playbook as we were trying to build this company. Instead of just kind of going into that long form, I'll just give you a story. We were trying to build the world's first 3D printed neighborhood in Mexico. The first time the United States and Mexico were having a tariff standoff. I'm trying to get tens of thousands of pounds of white concrete powder across the border, going from Texas into Mexico. I speak some Spanish. My chief technical officer speaks some Spanish. And we are trying to, if we don't get these products across the border, this project doesn't get done. There's people in Nacajuca and Villahermosa that need our help. These are 100-year flood conditions. These are people dealing with Zika virus. These are people that make less than $1 of a full day's work, American. I'm talking about these are hardworking people. And the goal is to get these products into the country. Man, I'll tell you, we posted up at the border, writing our own documents, having makeshift conversations, wheeling and dealing until we ultimately got it done. And about a week later, we were able to get these products into the country and ultimately kick off that project. Not for nothing, there was a magnitude, I believe, 7 earthquake that took place in that same region. Unfortunately, that town was severely impacted by that storm. Those houses still stand.
So you guys made the impact that you set out to make.
Absolutely, and if it would have stopped there, we could have been proud about, hey, we've changed the world because we've changed people's lives at this scale. But the goal was always hundreds of millions, if not billions of homes. So that mission continues.
And it's more than on its way to doing that now. So, but before we get into it, like I said, I want to jump around a little bit. So
okay.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that before you started trying to change the world through tech, you spent 10 years serving this country in the Marines, reaching the rank of staff sergeant before you decided to get out. That's a whole world in its own right. How in the world do you go from this world to tech?
I love that question because it assumes a couple of things that we limit ourselves by every day. It assumes that the skill set that you gain in one place is not directly transitive to another space. Even if it doesn't look on paper, like, oh, okay, you know how to do this because it says over here that you did that. It's like, one, we got the heart, right? The ability to show up every day with intestinal fortitude and work harder than everybody else. You can't take that from me. You could be smarter than me. You could have more natural skill set. I know you won't outwork me. That exists regardless. Then you talk about the things that you learn as far as the discipline, the ability to lead teams, the ability to build teams, to trust individuals around you to do the things that they do well, and step away from the things that you don't deliver at a high level so your team can progress forward with you on it as opposed to you getting in the way of it. So understanding all of those things are kind of table stakes. Those are the intangibles, if you will. The ability to then sell yourself as a veteran who sometimes has skills that civilians don't understand, you got to figure out that language. It's a little bit of a language barrier. We speak in acronyms. I was with 227 as a 2887, and I served 8 years downrange on this type of ship. Nobody knows what that means, man. The onus and the responsibility is you being able to sit down. You got chatbots now, so you can make this real easy, but to sit down and educate yourself on what those companies are looking for and say, oh, well, I know what that means. Now I have to change this phrasing into that. So What I will say is people are very kind and friendly in Texas to the veteran community. And so gaining opportunities was not necessarily difficult, but you still have to go prove yourself. There's not a whole lot of room for half-assing it in this space. Austin moves quick and life comes at you fast.
I love it. Then that leads me to my next question then, like reflecting on your journey as a director of operations and then a VP of operations and beyond, what specific leadership lessons from your time as a Marine Staff Sergeant proved most valuable in adapting to the diverse challenges of a tech-driven construction industry?
You gotta trust young people. I think this is one thing that as a country we get wrong all the time. There are so many incredibly talented young folks. I went downrange and served in combat environments with 17-year-olds and 18-year-old kids that were some of the most mature, responsible, able-bodied, sharp-thinking individuals that were able to get things done. And in those small units, you're talking about teams of 4 to 6, you have to be able to lean on everybody. It can't be well, he's gotta have time to learn and grow. No, we need you now. And so the ability to hire for individuals that didn't necessarily look proven, when you're already trying to do something that doesn't have a track record, where are the world's best house 3D printers? Where do I go recruit those people? They didn't exist. I had to go trust that people that were hungry, educated, and willing to learn would form around me and trust my leadership in order to get things done, like build the world's first 3D printed neighborhood. So I think the lesson is just trust the people to do the role that you empowered them to do. And micromanagement is the only thing that can stop those teams from achieving incredible things.
And I'd imagine in that former life, if you don't trust, there's other kind of consequences.
Yeah, I like to say that I haven't had a bad day since I got out because the consequences here, it's like, hey, nobody's shooting at you, no bullets whizzing over your head. My worst day here is better than my best day there. And those consequences have real and lasting impacts. I wear this bracelet every day for Corporal Steve McCarty, who is one of my best friends, is no longer with us because they went out on a mission and somebody didn't do what they had to do. And so there was an unfortunate loss of life there. But what we understand is that while that is a part of the game that you play, with precision, with practice, with timing, you can avoid a lot of avoidable mistakes. And I expect and I demand that level of attention from the teams that I build today. And I think trust and accountability work very well with one another. I've never told an employee of mine how to do what they do. You just need to go get this done. Get it done however that looks for you. I trust you, but I will verify that it got done.
That's fair. That's very fair. That's very fair. So when a civilian like myself thinks about the Marines, we automatically think of discipline, right? So drawing from your 10 years as a Marine, what aspects of military discipline have been most influential in guiding your decision-making at Icon, House of Dreamer, and every other endeavor that you've had?
Oh, House of Dreamer came up, got me looking fresh. I would say that discipline on this side of the house in technology, consumer packaged goods, now defense technology has a lot more to do with showing up and doing the things that nobody likes to do every day. There's a fantastic interview out there, and I don't need to spell it out, but Mike Tyson told you, it's like show up and do the things that you hate to do like you love them. That's the discipline that this requires, because everybody's got a great idea. Everybody is 1 or 5 or 20 steps away from being the person that took that thing that lived up here and made it actionable. We're sitting in one of those places. Kollective was a fantastic idea, and I bet you're not the first person that thought about it. Who had the discipline to show up and get told no 100 times, to scope out the space, to build out the client book, to show up and shake the hands, to meet the brands, to build it out? The discipline here is about that repetitive nature to do all the hard things every day with a smile on your face. And I relish those opportunities because I think that's what separates the doers from the people that have great ideas and never go anywhere. I love that person being out there because I'm gonna get that win.
I always say that, like, a lot of us had great ideas, but ultimately, who's gonna put in the work to actually bring those ideas to life, right?
Absolutely.
I think that's where I found that, like, the pool has gotten a lot smaller from great ideas to the people that are gonna execute that idea.
Execution is the key, and that's why operations is something that I've fallen in love with, because it's like, okay, you got visionaries, you got idea people, but then you got people that got to go figure it out. Hey, we're getting ready to go do this in another country. I don't know what that looks like. I got it.
Yeah.
We're gonna figure this out.
Well, then let's switch gears a little bit, because operations is one thing, right? And it's usually more of a science than it is an art, in the sense of discipline, like we talked about, showing up every day, like we talked about. But you've also served in a different role as a chief people's officer.
Oh, goodness.
What is a chief people's officer? What were your responsibilities? And then why the switch?
I love this question. Chief People Officer was basically a CHRO, that human resources officer, that individual that's going to be managing, people, talent acquisition, and ultimately the programming around making sure that your employees are happy, health benefits, all that sort of stuff. I'll be honest, it was not a natural fit, but it was what the company needed at the time. You got to understand, again, when you're talking about true disruption, like there's no one you can call to ask how this next step could go, because no one's ever taken this next step. Building out a team as quickly as we did, at one point, we went from the co-founders and about 5 employees, so there was sub 8 of us with some contractors, to the next phase of about 50 people. And then the next jump, we onboarded almost 300 people in 18 months. If you've ever run a business before.
Y'all onboarded that many people in 18 months?
Full-time employees in 18 months. So everything that you know about your business fundamentally changes, right? There are more people junior to your business, but in it, than people that know what's going on. So you have to build out the playbook. What kind of handbook can support all of these employees? What benefits package actually helps you compete for the top talent in these fields? Because these are highly technical engineering fields on one end, and then a blue collar or gray collar jobs on the other end, actually like delivering on construction projects at 5 o'clock in the morning, sometimes in foreign lands. And so we had to sharpen our pencils and get really, really great at determining what was going to help us be effective and strategic as this business was scaling rapidly around us. So there wasn't a traditional HR individual that was going to be able to walk right into this business and have immediate impact. And one of the great things about this trust factor is it goes 2 ways. So I sat down with my CEO and he was like, hey, your career's on the right trajectory. You could do this chief of staff because I really need it. We got all these new people here. Or you could go build out my people operation, because we're going to need to support all these folks. And I remember that conversation because we went on a run around the lake. It was like the week after the Christmas break. So we were kind of in that dead zone. And I spent a lot of time kind of soul searching, prayed on it, wasn't sure exactly what it was that I was going to be able to do, because I was going to have to learn this completely new function. And I think the chief of staff role could have been easy, air quotes, but I knew what the business needed was someone that could step in and really start getting their hands around what the infrastructure was going to need to look like for employees. So I put my hand in the air and I said, I'm going to learn this. I'm going to need some lead time, but I think I got it. And then served in that role for 2.5 years while onboarding another 200 some odd employees. So.
That's so wild to me, because we onboard people here, and I'm thinking about the time, effort, and energy that takes. We don't even have that many employees at both facilities put together, right? So trying to onboard that many in that short of time frame just seems like I can't even wrap my mind around that. But you're literally learning the position that requires a different type of leader for you to do it successfully, while onboarding these people and making sure that they're successful at, I'm assuming, their newest company, right?
Right, absolutely. And a lot of them were taking flyers because, again, what is this 3D printing thing? It sounds interesting. I read in the Austin Business Journal that they've got a lot of money in the bank, but what is this job actually? So we're also building out training modules to ensure that people knew what they were supposed to do when they got there. But I'll tell you what, it's a word we haven't talked about yet, and I think it's the reason why I was able to find success. And as much as I want to credit myself and my team, who was tremendous, it basically came down to the culture we built, because everybody knew it was going to be unacceptable to not be able to hit the ground running. So from the first moment you sat down with somebody on the HR team to when you had your first day with your actual team, everybody knew, like, hey, you came in here pre-read. We had the CEO's reading list of all like the important things that could help give you a leg up when you came to the job. And if you hadn't read it, you didn't make it to your first day. We understood that it was going to be wildly important for you to be able to contribute on day one. And so that culture piece of it, it was like everybody was accountable. This is in our handbook to today, we had a 0 asshole policy, and excuse my language, but it was like, we will reject you as an individual who works here if you cannot find yourself as a mesh point for this team. We will seek you out and we will eliminate you as a piece of this program because we don't have time for that. And that culture was so strong that it brought everybody with them. We got a weak link, pick them up, they're trying. As long as you're trying, you got a spot here. And we treated everyone like that. And so what I loved about it is that the culture was incredibly strong.
Speaking specifically to that culture, like, again, you're learning this position. I'm trying to make sure that we stay in that frame of mind of like, you don't have 10, 15, 20 years experience in this role. So you're learning this position. Walk me through specifically, like you just said, the handbook made total sense, right? The no asshole policy made total sense. But like, as you're kind of fostering this culture, what does that balance look like between rapid innovation and then structured processes that are necessary for success?
Yeah, this is hard because this is one of those areas that gets uncomfortable, right? You've got process orientation. Something like HR is very driven around the idea that like, this is the way things go. This is right, this is wrong, this is black, this is white, right? I get it or I don't. And the nature of a startup is like, hey, the truth was this today, and tomorrow that looks very different. It might be different customer expectations. It might be, there's somebody that contributed financially to the business would like you to be working on something else as a higher priority. And so you have to be Semper Gumby, which is a principle that I took from the Marine Corps. Always be flexible, right? Like you are forever going to have to figure out when, hey, this is the hard line and it must be this way. And then when it's got to be fungible, like we have to be willing to have some give and take, especially with the hiring managers, right? Like, hey, here's the qualifications that we need for this role. But we just found this amazing cat that doesn't have the traditional education on YouTube solving this problem that we have nobody to figure out how to solve it in the building. Let's make an exception to get Buddy over here to see if they can actually do this work. Come to find out, that individual today is the chief technical officer of that company because we took a flyer on him when he was building robotic systems for a pizza company at the time, and now has one of the most important roles in the company and has more than earned that responsibility. So that's a piece of it. And I would be remiss if I didn't actually mention a name here. My counterpart at the time, Regina Nettleton, was literally spending the free moments that we had in between this rapid onboarding and scaling this company teaching me the nuances of this job because she had been in the role for years. If it wasn't for that deep partnership and trust between the two of us, I don't become the effective leader that I need to be in order to even get to the point where we're able to scale it so rapidly. So she was up-leveling me at the same time. Now, I'm in those books after hours, up-leveling myself. And then when it's game time, we're figuring things out on the fly. That's what you have to do when you're moving so quickly.
I'm thinking about these two roles that we've kind of highlighted to this point that you served in as one being super operational based, and then like you just talked about, one having to be a little bit flexible, having to see talent, recognize talent, and grow talent that might not be ready yet. So one being so much science and the other being a little bit of art. And I'm thinking about the balance that's required in order to do that while being the leader that you need to be and the student at the same time. That had to stretch you. How are you managing all of this going on in your life at that time?
Friends, family, not to be corny, but the gym. I think one of the outlets when things are so pressure laden, right? Like when you take on a mission that is wildly impactful, right? Like you could do a job. Cool, investment banking sounds fun, people are gonna make some money. But like when you do a job that it's like, hey, this is existential to human life. Like one of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs at the bottom of it, like we need housing. It was an interesting space to be in because it's completely agnostic, right? Like if you were a Republican or a Democrat or rich or poor, it didn't matter. Housing is a requirement. So we had the green light from people to move as we needed to move, but then all the pressure of actually executing lives with you every day because there's real people that don't have access to the housing that they need. Right here in this city that we love, in Austin, Texas, right there where I'm from in Los Angeles, like it's a real problem that we can see every day. And so you internalize that a bit, and you've got the responsibility of de-stressing yourself because if you show up as the worst version of you, you're not getting anything done. Your team can't trust that your behavior and your mood is going to be what it needs to be to empower people and to uplift people when they need it. I swear this was a thing that we used to call out. It was always somebody's last day. It was always somebody's day that they were ready to quit. you didn't need to stop that person from quitting. You just needed to be the best version of yourself on that day when they needed to see you killing it. So it's not like I showed up every day and I was just the best boss and I'm crushing it. I just had the type of people around me. It was like, oh, it's my day to carry the water. I got it today. It was always somebody's day that they were getting ready to ring the bell, throw in the towel, walk away. But it's like, no, you need that team around you. And so that, and then just, you got to take care of your chicken. You got to take care of your mentals. And I think as long as you're doing what you got to do for whatever that looks like for you, if that's reading, yoga, counselor, time with the fam, whatever that looks like for you, make space for that. And I think startups make a mistake here because I think everybody subscribes to this idea of move fast and break things, and the ... there is, and it's okay to sometimes break people. And I disagree with that vehemently. If you can create a space for incredibly fast moving people to de-stress as they need to, as long as the work's getting done, don't give those people a hard time about what they like to do on their nights and weekends. Create the space for them to go fast at work and chill when they need to, because that's how you're going to keep fresh bodies. It's the same as sports. Like, sure, I could have you out there on every third down, but if you gassed, you're not giving us anything on this play. Go ahead and come off, reset, and then let's get after it on the next one. And I think the startup culture that we've seen is veered a little bit too far to like, I'll just grind them to the end. And if they leave, they leave. And it's like, well, you didn't just lose the person on that day. You lost all that intrinsic knowledge base that this person had with them. And you lost all the trust of the people that trusted that person to do their job. And I think that we can improve on this in the startup space, absolutely.
Yeah, man, it sound like you were the leader that Icon needed at that time, for sure, right? And we've seen the massive success that you, your original team, and the hundreds of other employees that are now there have done in a space that, like you said, is super needed. Let me ask you, when did you know it was time to move on? It was time to do something new?
Yeah, I think every startup has its ebbs and flows. 5 years at a startup is a long time, right? The company is different every 6 months. And I think for us, we had reached this point where, one, we weren't a startup anymore, right? There's 500 people milling about, all the processes are built, the thing works, we're executing on projects, there are large name benefactors across the board. Like, I'm not gonna say we did it, because it's not done until it's done, but like, what we set out to do in that first, second, and third iteration was complete. Then you have to have the conversation about like, okay, well then what's this new version look like? Okay, I sat in this seat, and I sat in this seat, and I wore this hat. I need to continue to be challenged, and the business needs to be able to continue to gain things from my perspective. If I'm stagnant, I'm not benefiting anyone. So in the same way that, again, I had great leadership as well, I'm able to have that conversation with my CEO. I had moved out of HR and moved into the special projects role, which was quite possibly the coolest job I've ever had. I mean, I'm working on...
Let's dive into that, because as I'm looking you up, I'm reading, I know you personally, and what is talk to me about that. How do I even apply for that? What is it?
If you figure out how to apply for special projects, let me know. If you see one of those job descriptions, just take it. Just take the role. At Icon, it meant, so Icon had this very large ecosystem, right? So you've got housing and all the verticals that fall under that, right? We're pretty traditional, we understand that, but there's a lot of work to be done over there. It's a $1 trillion industry. Then you have the actual technology piece of it. So you're innovating, you've got skunkworks, you're building things that didn't exist before. So there's a whole vertical for that on the technical side. And because, again, you're a friendly, no one has anything bad to say about this. They want to see you fly high and go fast. So there's all these people that are trying at all times to enter the orbit at any given time. Actors, celebrities, just people with big checks that want to contribute. And it wasn't a bad thing, but there are so many of these people that they start to detract from those core pillars of the business. And so me and our senior executive team had a conversation about what would it look like to consolidate all of these folks that want to be a part of the ecosystem, that we want a part of this ride, and give them an experience that's commensurate to our brand while not distracting away from the core business. And that in practicum became things like helping to execute on a Formula One deal that put our logo on a driver and a car. It came down to like being in Calabasas, California with Kanye West on the day that Kobe passed away. It turned into meeting with the Gates Foundation and liaising closely with some of the mega corporations in technology because they were trying to find a way to either contribute or to invest or to just be a part of this wave that was happening. And so I got to live in that space, and it was incredible because I think it taught me that I thought I was like at a place, right? I'm one of them ones now. And it's like, no, go spend some time in a room, not even with Bill Gates, just go meet his secretary, dog. Do you know how many things this person touches? How many like angles on the world that they see that just are not available to you? And it really like clicked for me that there's just so much more out there that even I had had an opportunity to think about or lament about. And it was a really eye-opening experience. So I value that experience every day. But kind of once you've done that in operations and people,
You've checked a lot of boxes at this.
I'm not going to be the CEO of the company. He's fantastic. He's doing his thing.
Yeah.
What else is there to do here? So we had a conversation again. It's like, hey, I could really use, we're making some changes to the shape of the organization. Would you like to go back into this role over on the people side? And that was less enticing for me. I was like, I think this is the moment where we shake hands, we hug, we shed some tears, drink some mezcal, and move on. And ultimately that opportunity, and I say opportunity because it really did feel like one. The opportunity to leave graciously after years of service to a business where I built relationships and have lifelong friends was something I'll cherish forever. And because it got to end on such a positive note, those relationships remain unchanged.
Man, this feels like the last episode of my favorite sitcom. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, man, this was a great show. But as I'm thinking it through, one thing we don't talk about, we haven't in previous interviews either, is like that place of completion with a thing. Like, we all know this is completed. My work here is done. Like, I don't know if scary is the right word, but like,
you can say scary.
What are the feelings around approaching that moment of completion when you're done doing a thing that has been you?
I think, so I processed this in two very different ways. Same me, two different versions. One was scared in the same way that I was scared when I transitioned out of the military, right? You've been doing a thing, you understand it, you're good at it. I could do this thing for the rest of my life, but it's time to get off the train. Now what? You got to go figure that out. And there are programs and systems to help you, but that's you. That's coming from you. To be in your professional career and be working towards something, specifically in construction at that point, with the experience at Treehouse, with the experience at the organization I was working for before, plus that, I had been in this space now for almost 15 consecutive years. It was time to do something else, but I was scared as hell. You got to go learn to do something else, or you fall back on something that you already know. And I wasn't going back to the military. The knees was done. That was done. So it was like, okay, well, then what do you want to do with this education that you have and this knowledge base that you have and this depth and breadth of people that you know now in a city that's really inviting to people that are looking to shake hands with you and say, what would you like to do next? So I spent about a month being scared. But it wasn't like I was just sitting on my butt. We were out creating. I met a partner in Austin Suter that's a friend of ours mutually, where we started a direct-to-consumer brand in House of Dreamer. We started having serious conversations about other things that we wanted to exist in the city. Again, not asking for permission, more so like, what can we do? Which turned into Reserve Bar on, East 7th Street. Go get you a glass of wine, by the way. And in that time frame, I got really serious about some things that were sitting in the book. I would like to do this. Well, what's stopping you from doing it? I got all of this momentum, right? Well, nothing's stopping me. Well, let's just try some things, right? And it just so happened that those things were working. It didn't make me special. It's just like I trusted that inertia. I trusted the business relationships, and I was able to just go. You do that a couple of times, and people start paying attention. Aren't you the person that was doing that, and I just saw you over here and you associated with that, and this is the fourth time I've seen you doing something. What is it? And my personal thesis in that moment of transition became, nobody's telling me no. The only limiting factor is that voice in the back of my head that sounds exactly like me saying, are you sure you can do it? But I got all of this laid out in front of me and said, you just did some crazy, difficult stuff that, again, 5 years ago, they was laughing at you. They said it couldn't be done. Why don't you just stick to traditional
So I'm sorry to interrupt, if I'm hearing this right, even after 10 years in service, another 15 years in one industry, being employee number one of now a multi-billion-dollar company, leaving on the best of terms, and I'm assuming that you're gonna be reaping the benefits of that for a very long time, you still having self-doubts about what you can do in spaces?
I think people talk about this in ways that are interesting to me because it doesn't feel like what gets described as imposter syndrome. I feel like I belong in every room that I'm in. But there's still a mental shift that has to start over with like, okay, this isn't what I do every day. My routine was set. You wake up at 5:30, you get the kids off to school, you go get that gym session in, and then you know exactly where you're going, what you're doing, who you're meeting with. When that goes away, you got to start processing how do you move moment to moment, minute to minute, hour to hour. And for me, it was like, how do I want to fill this space? And that took some feeling out, especially in a place that can feel like Candyland sometimes. It's like you can literally get involved in whatever you want to here in Austin. And so it kind of felt overwhelming with all the opportunity pouring in. It's like, well, what do you want to do? And at first I just grabbed at a bunch of it and said, all of it. I want it all. And I still do, but you still have to time that out. You can't have it all every day. The good, fast, cheap matrixy, you can have two of the three. You can't have them all. And so it really forced me to slow down and be reflective and let that fear dissipate and turn that into action. And so, yeah, little self-doubt, that'll creep in. I'm only human, but you can use that and let it paralyze you, or you can use that and turn it into motivation. And ultimately, we were able to get it pushing.
Well, talk to me about that. I don't want to move too far from there. You turned it into motivation. Give me like something actionable. If I'm dealing with that, what is something that you suggest I do to potentially overcome that?
Yeah, I think the things that you get for free, it is incredibly important for you to be surrounding yourself with people that matter, right? Like we all got friends that ain't doing nothing. They ain't moved since high school, ain't doing nothing. Those are the wrong people to be around. I love the phrase, hey, you show me the 4 people that move a certain way and you will eventually be the 5th. And that works both ways. If you're hanging around with a bunch of jokers, you'll be the 5th joker in the deck. If you're hanging around with a bunch of people that are creating motion, you'll get drawn into that because there's just motion creates emotion. So here we are in the mix. And so indexing to people like yourself, indexing to people like Ricky Soto, indexing to people like Antonio, indexing to people like Elon that were, not that one, that were in my mix at the time.
Not that one.
We're not going to even speak on that one. You feel me? But really sitting down and having those grounding conversations about like, we know who you are and we know what you're capable of doing and we're in this mix with you and we're going to support you in these next moves. A good friend of mine had reached out and knew that I was available and was like, how long are you going to sit over there and start new companies when you're ready to go do something with me? And so we sat down and felt that out, and that led to my next opportunity. And so now I'm working in the missile defense space, utilizing some of that space architecture knowledge, utilizing that business development knowledge. I've even recruited for this organization because I'm using that talent acquisition knowledge. And so, you bolt on all of these pieces and you never really know when you're gonna need them. They just exist with you. And then when it's time to deploy them, you can. And so this moment in my life feels like a really balanced use of all these strange skill sets that I've got to go do something that I think ultimately will be impactful for the world in ways that unfortunately are really needed right now.
I think it's pretty cool that you keep finding yourself in spaces that not only are fulfilling to you, but directly impact the world. And whether it's providing housing or security, like you're directly impacting the world.
I got that from my parents.
I don't believe that that's an accident. What I was getting ready to say, where does that come from?
That comes from Clarence Henderson and Doreen Haley. Those two individuals made it incredibly incumbent upon us as young people to understand that we had a responsibility in this world that existed beyond just being here. And that's because of the people that raised them. My dad's father was raised in a segregated southern Louisiana where somebody owned the rights to her labor when she was the little girl. And then my mom came from South Central Los Angeles and had me, 17, 18 years old, join the service to get away from that, as my father joined the Marine Corps to get away from that. So I got an Air Force mom and a Marine Corps dad, and they're as serious as you could expect, but they still know how to have a good time. But when they had kids, they locked in on, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and you will be benefiting from that But then you have a responsibility to take this education that you will get, these opportunities that will fall before you, and action them in a way that brings not only you forward, but your community forward, and eventually your own individual family forward. And I can remember those conversations starting when I was 7, 8 years old. And so, and now my children, they understand the responsibility. They go out and volunteer with me. They hand out meals on Thanksgiving. My son has stopped me at the light and say, hey, Daddy, I've got an extra snack. And I see the man over there doesn't have any food. Can we roll down the window so I can go feed this man? And that's probably one of the things I'm the most proud of in my life.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. So I want to reflect a little bit then, from the upbringing to your time in service to literally helping change the world in the housing, and to then the entrepreneurial space, and now getting back to using a lot of those skill sets that were worked on and gained over the years to do exactly what you're doing now in missile defense. I want to reflect on your diverse leadership roles across all spectrums, and then ask you simply, what accomplishments are you most proud of, and how has managing that success alongside your family responsibilities shaped your personal and professional outlook?
Oh, wow. What a great question. Let me take a minute. I think one of the things that I will forever be proud of is literally the day we completed the project in Mexico. You got to understand, when you're building something, well, I know you know this, but for the audience out there, when you're building something, it becomes a part of who you are. Every day you show up to this building and you have the vision in your head, you know what it's going to be, and you just got to get there one day. And the interesting thing about housing is when you reach that day, whatever you envision this place to be, it's not yours. And handing those keys over to the families that were going to inhabit this space, that were going to have children, have the best of times and the worst of times, build generational wealth, change their lives as a result of the place that they now live, symbolized in the handing over of the key, was a crazy moment for me. It's like, we've been working here to create this moment, and it's here, a tangible handoff. I'm not allowed to just walk in this front door anymore like I have for the last 6 months. This belongs to someone now. But that was what we came here to do. So we can leave knowing that the job here is done. And that car ride away from that job site, it was like, oh, that's not a job site anymore. That's a neighborhood. Crazy. And how I manage that, I think in the lexicon of, or in terms of my life and family responsibilities, is I try to be the most humble version of myself around my family and provide them the examples of what they need from dad. I've been the dude in charge a lot. I've been directly responsible for hundreds of Marines, millions of dollars worth of gear, hundreds of thousands of transactions. At home, you're just the person that people need to see. They need to love, they need to be able to open up to. You're not directing a program at home. You need to be available to these people so they can find love and solace and safety in your presence. And that's work for someone who is super action oriented and it's just like, can we just go? But the answer to that is like, quite simply, no. These people need to know how much you love them. And being able to internalize accomplishments and know that like, it doesn't matter who you are outside of this place. When you get out of that car in your garage, put that dad smile on and get ready to go hit some baseballs in the backyard and run around and throw the loveys across the room and show up and give hugs and kisses and cook dinner, because here, you dad. And people need dad.
And I love that. So if you were looking backwards a little bit more and thinking about that journey from LA to Texas and everything in between from there to now, what would you say you would tell the Dmitri that's starting that journey as the 3 things he has to take with him on this journey?
I ask myself this question all the time, and I think the answer has changed over the years, but I'm pretty sure I'm at the real answer now. I would tell that crazy son of a gun to do everything the same way he did it before. Make the mistakes, go big, attack the world in a way that says you're supposed to be here. Because when I was young and I didn't have the skills and it came across as arrogance, what I was doing is creating a baseline for the individual that could have the capacity to realize I wasn't treating the people the way that I needed to, but I could grow into that person. And when I was too scared to try, but ultimately to grow into the person that was never going to be scared to try again, I needed to have those past failures to look on and be like, we know what it feels like to hit the bottom, but you have to learn what it feels like to hit the bottom in order to know where you're going. And I would tell that young man, you're going to do some stupid stuff, but you're going to do some great stuff too. And tinkering with this journey is probably going to lead you down another path. And I think that the path that I walked was the only one that I could have walked to end up sitting right here having this conversation with you.
I love it. So do it the same way you did it. Attack the world. I think that was attack the world, and then be you.
Be you and show up authentically you. This is a funny Austin story. Come full circle too, but I can remember I was about to get the biggest promotion of my life right here in Austin, Texas. I'm talking about my first real significant six-figure job. Up from like, I was making normal every day, like I got my little apartment, I'm good, I'm doing all right, to like, hey, congratulations, you were sales manager of the year at the time. I got invited to the little president's club or whatever. I'm about to get a raise. And I sit down in my boss's office and he's like, hey, fantastic, runner up in the entire corporation, second all time, like you killed it. These were ridiculous numbers. I think we did like $185 million in revenue, up from like 50 the year before, like, ugh, you know what I mean? And it was like, everything's great, paperwork looks right, go ahead and sign right here. But before we sign this paperwork, we would really like you to cut your hair off. The image that you're giving the business right now is a little less than professional. And we understand that your sales numbers look great, but as a more public-facing individual, we could really use a less ethnic hairstyle. And Jay, I cut my hair. I didn't know what else to do. It was more money than I'd ever imagined I could make. I didn't have, again, I needed to make that mistake, but I didn't have the pattern recognition to understand that what was happening to me wasn't all good and that I could fight back. So I took the job, and of course I'm miserable because I sacrificed something that was important to me, of who I was at that time, for money. Never again, but I needed to go through that in order to be able to empower teams to show up authentically themselves. So when I got an opportunity to slide that piece of paper in front of somebody, I was like, go be you, was the message I got to send. And I really appreciate that.
I think it's necessary that you went through that because, look at the heights that you've climbed, the seats that you sat in, the lives that you impacted, and the people that you've led. Who's to say without that experience if you would have handled those positions with the same grace?
I got a chance to do the Today Show in Jordan 9s.
Yeah, see what I'm saying?
You know how important that was for people in the community to see, though, for real? And I think we miss an opportunity to really have everybody show up as exactly who they are. And I think that diversity of experience and that diversity of skill set and that diversity of character actually leads to more problem solving than we'll ever get to, just conforming to what people believe things are supposed to look like. I've had tremendous opportunities to have conversations with folks in the housing space about housing inequity and about housing insecurity, because when I was young, we did have moments of like, where are we gonna live? We did have those moments of like, we're taking a cross-country trip in a car. We find out a little bit later on, that's where we had to be. And people can trust you and have real conversations with you because you're authentic to them. And those things were as important as any degree that I've gotten, any education formally, is the ability to show up and be a person that people can trust simply based on the person that you've had to be in your past.
That's powerful. Well, I'll tell you, you have successfully disrupted and impacted industries that will impact the world. And not a lot of people can say that. So congratulations, Dmitri Julius, and thank you for your time.
I appreciate you all. Keep doing it. Hey, the people that are trying to make the world worse don't take no days off. We need to be the same way.
Boom, that's it right there. That's the one right there at the end. Oh man, that's clay, bro. Ooh.